بسم الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وبعد. Alhamdulillah, this is the last of the three sessions on this chapter on Surah Al-Ikhlas, the Surah of Sincerity. And again, just to kind of go through quickly what we've already talked about. We've already talked about the introduction to this chapter, to this surah. We talked about the first three verses, right? What they talked about. Qul huwallahu ahad, say He is Allah, the one and only. Allahu samad, the one who is eternal, absolute, meaning eternally independent of Himself, but dependent upon everybody else is dependent upon Him. Lam yalid wa lam yulad, that He neither begets nor is He begotten. And we're at the final ayah of this, and inshallah, if anyone has missed any of these, and these are online, you can go back and see them. But the final ayah in this surah is وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, which roughly translates to nor is there to Him any equivalent. So again, just to kind of summarize, the whole chapter is coming to an end with this final verse. So it's 4 verses, and the entire theology of what we believe concerning Allah, concerning God, is mentioned in these 4 ayat, these 4 verses. So again, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, what is it that we believe that say He is Allah, the one and only, meaning there's nothing else besides Him that is of His qualities. Allahu samad, He is a samad, and a samad was that which is not in need of anything, but everything else is in need of that one thing, right? So that He is a samad, He provides for everybody, He is the one that's the source of everything, for everything. Lam yalid wa lam yulad, He does not beget, nor is He begotten, meaning He was not born of anyone, nor does He give birth Himself. And then this is the conclusion of those three verses, and it's basically telling us what those 3 verses are talking about, what those first 3 verses are actually saying. And what they're actually saying is وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, meaning there is nothing that is equivalent to Him. And the word kuf, which is used here to mean equivalent, it has meanings that revolve around and something that's either an example, something that can be given as an example of something. So if I tell you, well, this is a table, I can give you an example by describing other tables, right? So there's nothing that can be used as an example. Something similar, it also means there's nothing that can be brought closer to meaning into what He truly really is, and or one equal in rank or position. So these are all of the meanings of the word kuf, which Allah is saying that this doesn't belong to anybody except Him, meaning there's no example that can be given, there's nothing that can be mentioned as something being similar to Allah, nor is there anything or anyone that is equal in rank or position. Imam Mujahid, one of the students of the companions, he said that this ayah also means that He has no companion or spouse. And when you think about that, one of the arguments that is made is that, well, in order for him to have children, he would have to have a companion or a spouse. One of those arguments that was made by some people. He said that this ayah, لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, means he has no companion or spouse. Meaning if he was to beget and have children, that means he would have a spouse, and then that spouse would be something similar or an example or close to him in nature. So this is what he specifically was saying, that it also means that he has no companion and no spouse, because that would necessitate that they be equal in nature. And there's nothing else besides Allah, besides God, that is the nature or with the qualities of Allah Himself. So this also comes down to an issue that we have about the names and attributes of Allah. Right, the names and attributes of Allah. We see a lot of the names and attributes of Allah, and we have a class every Friday after Isha as well, with Hafiz Ahmad Ali, where it goes into detail about the beautiful names of Allah and what they mean and how we implement them in our lives. But just the basic understanding of the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the number one thing we have to remember is that we only describe Allah, we only describe Him with that which He has described Himself. So we don't make up our own depictions or understandings or definitions of Allah, of God and His attributes. We only use those attributes which He Himself has used to define Himself. Because again, we don't know anything except that which He has told us about Himself. So we only describe Him, the names and attributes that He described Himself. We cannot understand exactly how those descriptions manifest themselves. Right? So we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. There is nothing that is similar to Allah, nothing that can be compared to Him, nothing that is like Him, yet He is the one who sees all things and hears all things. So when naturally comes to people's mind is, well, how does He see all things and how does He hear all things? This is something we don't know, right? And we don't question, we don't ask, because it's just completely out of our ability to understand how that can happen, right? How Allah can see, how Allah can hear everything and know everything. It's beyond our understanding how that happens. So we don't question how that happens, but we understand that it does happen and He does do it. So obviously we establish their meanings, and we benefit from the meanings of these attributes without attributing any type of similarity or giving an example or these kinds of things. So we don't compare Allah to any of His creation, and we don't give any similitude, example, or describing how He does certain things that are related to His names and attributes. Now this point is a point of difference of opinion amongst the different theological schools of Islam, right? So we have a few different theological approaches to how you understand the names and attributes of Allah. I'm just presenting to you the one that I know myself best. And again, there are a few differences. Some people tend to interpret some of the names of Allah to mean certain other things. Some people tend to leave even the interpretation of the meanings to Allah Himself, and they don't define them with exact meanings and terminologies and things like that. This is a point of difference among the theological schools, but in general, it's agreed upon that we only describe Allah with what He has described Himself with. Now the structure of this verse is really interesting as well. So when Allah says in the Arabic, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ, this is not the standard way that a sentence in Arabic would be constructed, right? The standard way, as Imam Ibn al-Jawzi mentions, it should be وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ أَحَدٌ كُفُوًا, right? And that would mean that if in that structure it would mean, and there isn't, and this is literal, and there isn't for Him anyone that is equivalent or anyone that is equal. But the structure that Allah chose to use is وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ, switching the last two, and there isn't for Him an equivalent anyone, ahad, right? So there's a switch in the natural or the standard way a sentence would be constructed by any Arab-speaking person. And one of the things we understand from when in the Arabic language, specifically in the Quran, when a sentence is constructed in a different way than it normally would be constructed, there's a reason for it, right? There's a reason for it. And some of the scholars, they mention here that the reason is to emphasize the fact that there is nothing equal to Allah. So the word equal has been put before, so that it stands out from and anyone that understands the natural structure of the Arabic language, it will click in their minds that it should be the other way around, right? Why is it this way around? And when it clicks, that means there's something important about the word that has been switched. So for an Arabic speaker, especially an Arabic speaker at that time when they were speaking this language in the classical times, they would understand this immediately, that there's something specific, something special about this switch, and that is that the fact that there is no equal is being emphasized. Now, the amount of emphasis that's being placed on this concept is huge. The first 3 verses talk about the same thing. They talk about the nature of Allah, how He is one and only. He is the only one who is eternal. He is the only one, who He is not begotten, nor does He beget. Meaning they're already talking about that there is nothing equal to Him. And then the last verse is emphasizing that same thing. It's summarizing it up. There's nothing equal to Him. And in that emphasis, there's an emphasis. By switching the order of the words and by switching the regular structure of the sentence, there's another emphasis. So linguistically, there's lots of emphasis. And I'm saying the word emphasis a lot. I'm putting a lot of emphasis on the word emphasis. But there's a lot of emphasis on the fact that we don't attribute any similarities with anything when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it comes to God. So this is why the sentence structure here has been switched. There are a couple of hadith narrations from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam about this nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how we understand it. So in one of the hadith, this is narrated in the collection of Imam Bukhari, عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال الله كذبني ابن آدم ولم يكن له ذلك وشتمني ولم يكن له ذلك أما تكذيبه إياي أن يقول إني لن أعيده كما بدأته وأما شتمه إياي أن يقول اتخذ الله ولدا وأنا الصمد الذي لم ألد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد لم ألد, okay, this is the structure got switched. وَلَمْ أُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لِي كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ. So this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a hadith Qudsi saying the same thing in Surah Al-Ikhlas, but in a first person perspective. So the meaning is, and the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah said, again it's a hadith Qudsi, the son of Adam tells a lie against me and he hasn't the right to do so. And he abuses me, curses me, or says lies about me, and he hasn't the right to do so. He's telling a lie against me is his saying that I will not recreate him as I created him for the first time. And his abusing me is his saying that Allah has begotten children, while I am the self-sufficient master whom all creatures need, who begets not nor was he begotten, and there is none like unto me. So this is the same structure of this chapter, of this surah, in the first person form, because Allah Himself is saying this in a hadith Qudsi, which the Prophet ﷺ narrated. So you see what the attribution is, right? How, again, the emphasis on the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what His nature is, what the reality is, and versus what people may say about Him. This another narration from the Prophet ﷺ, narrated by in Imam al-Bukhari's collection. He says, لا أحد أصبر على أذى سمعه على أذى سمعه من الله إنهم يجعلون له ولدا وهو يرزقهم ويعافيه. The Prophet ﷺ said, none is more patient than Allah against the harmful and annoying words he hears from the people. Right? They ascribe children to Him, yet He bestows upon them health and provision. Right? So this is teaching us many things. Number one, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is tolerant, right? Is patient, right? And this is one of the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, asbar. There's no one that is more sabr than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For us, when people say things we don't like, they call us names to our faces, they insult our families, we get upset and we do things, right? We get upset and we take action. But Allah Himself, God Himself, there are people that believe so many things about Him, right? They say so many things about Him that that we believe, again, is not the truth. But yet He continues to provide for them, He continues to give them health, He continues to answer their prayers and so on and so forth, because there is no one that is more patient than Him against the harmful things or the annoying things that people say about Him. Right? So He's still the one that provides rizq and that provides health. All of that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just in summary, in finishing up here, as the last slide inshallah, is the last ayah of the surah as well. Again, this surah is called Al-Muqashqisha, right? One of the other names of the surah. And another surah was called Al-Muqashqisha. The cheats on the board, on the screen. What was the other surah? Al-Kafirun. Yeah, you can know it's already on there. But Surah Al-Kafirun is also called Al-Muqashqisha. So together they're called Al-Muqashqishatan, the two Muqashqishas, basically the two curers, the things that provide cure from some type of a disease. So again, Surah Al-Kafirun is the surah that talks about rejecting associates or partners with Allah, with God. And Surah Al-Ikhlas is the surah that affirms the oneness, the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So combined, these two chapters, these two surahs make up almost the entire basic theology of Islam. The first one, Al-Kafirun, rejects any type of associates, that anybody else has anything to do with worship with Allah. And then this one affirms for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala everything that only belongs to Him. And Shaykh Muhammad Ali As-Sabuni in his Tafsir, he summarizes all of these 4 verses into what they're talking about. So he says the first verse talks about the oneness of Allah, and it rejects the idea that there are multiple deities to begin with, multiple gods to begin with. The second the verse establishes His perfection and rejects any defects, right? Because He is a samad. He is the one that is in need of nothing, but everything is in need of Him. The third verse establishes His eternal nature by rejecting offspring or being begotten, meaning He's not born, nor does He give birth. It is only Him that is there, and He is there eternally, always was, and always will be. And the fourth verse, the final one, establishes His greatness and His majesty by rejecting partners and equals, saying there's absolutely nothing that can be given as an example in comparison to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So with this kind of summarizes the whole past 2 weeks as well, what we've been talking about, the details of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what shirk actually is, what his nature and his the idea of the other ideas that people have come up with about his theology. And it goes back to the same Abrahamic message that He is one and He has no partners, He has no equals or anything like that, and He is the only one that we depend upon for everything, especially for worship. Worship is not given to anyone except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because of these reasons, because He is the only one that is eternal in nature, and everything and all provisions come through Him as well. So with that finishes up this chapter, Surah Al-Ikhlas. Inshallah, next week we're not going to have the Hanaqah. I will be out of town for 5-6 days, starting leaving Friday. So I will not be here Wednesday. So next week we won't be having the Hanaqah on Wednesday. But the week after that, inshallah, we'll continue. But if there are any questions or comments at this point, inshallah, we can take them. None whatsoever. Oh man, yes.
Does it describe somewhere in the definition like all goodness to God?
Does it describe somewhere that
He's all good?
Yeah. So there are other verses in the Quran that that represent that same thing. There are other sayings of our Prophet that also mention the same thing. وَالشَّرُّ لَيْسَ إِلَيْكَ, that we don't attribute evil in and of itself, like what it means to be evil to God. We only attribute things that are good to God, because whatever He does essentially is for the better, is for the good. Yeah. So So definitely, in other verses, definitely that clear distinction would be made. Yeah. Anything else? Going once, going twice. So, right, جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وجزاكم الله خير. And again, if you would like to give blood, they're going to be here until 9 o'clock, maybe a little bit over, to accommodate you for that, inshallah. جزاكم الله خير. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It's off or still?